We will have the conversations that few are prepared to have, and more importantly, conversations centered on rationality. Subscribe now to listen to Rational Voices with Sunil. Hi Kent, nice to meet you. How's your weekend been so far?
So Neil, nice to meet you. Sunday night, very relaxed. Time with my son today, playing tennis in the gym. So yeah, really enjoyable weekend. All good to go.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, was it proper tennis or paddle? Because I know paddle's just becoming bigger and bigger. Which one was it?
No, so it was normal tennis. My son had two major knee operations. He's got a genetic problem with his knees. Comes from my side of the family. He dislocated his kneecaps 8 times in 2 years. Had two major knee operations, and we played tennis. And it's amazingly fulfilling to see how far he's come in 1 year, where he couldn't play any sport, and now he's playing sport. It's a great.
It's
We'll
amazing.
talk about business. We'll talk about business. We'll talk about all sorts of things. But the beauty of life is seeing the simple things. Having a game of tennis, seeing my son run around and have no worries about dislocating his kneecaps is priceless. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I see these things today then where previously I might not have seen them. So yeah, it was beautiful. It's good.
amazing, amazing. Yeah, talking about business and stuff like that. So, some people will have watched some of you appear on other people's podcasts in the last few months, and yeah, I've caught you a couple of times where I've watched a couple of your podcasts, and it's been really interesting learning about your insights for viewers and listeners who aren't aware of who you are. It'd be great to get just a general background into some of the work you've done and what you do today.
Yeah, sure. So obviously I'm Australian. I grew up in a small country town, left school, did a law degree, didn't like that. Studied law, then I practiced law for 18 months in Brisbane in Australia. Played a lot of rugby, ended up at Oxford University for 1 year and played for Australia under 21s rugby, played for Queensland, played for New South Wales. I'm an Oxford Blue
Wow.
at rugby, played for Harlequins, and then got a job in the city. I was in the city for 22 years, ended up a director of Citibank. Unfortunately, I had a cocaine addiction issue. I lost a lot of weight, nearly died. And I'm 9 years clean and sober. And what I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years is I went and studied for 2.5 years therapeutic counselling. And today I'm a counsellor and a mentor. And where I'm at today is really interesting. I thought I was going to be an addiction counsellor. And then once I jumped onto LinkedIn, the evolution of my career in the counselling mentoring space has meant that I counsel and mentor a lot of high net worth internet individuals, a lot of very successful professional men, and it's very interesting that I've attracted this type of person. And I can only think when I speak to them, they struggle to find a counsellor or a mentor who can actually relate and identify to the space that they're in. Let me give you an example. So I've got a crypto trader client of mine, and he's 35. He's got about $50 million in the bank, and he had a bit of an issue with vices, cocaine, and some other stuff. And when he came to me, and we've been working together for about 3 or 4 months, and massive improvement. And I said to him one day, he said to me, "I'm just so happy I found you." And I said, he's had counselling before. I said, "What's the difference between me and counsellors you've had before? Yeah, this counsellor you had before?" He said, "Mate, they couldn't relate." So what's that mean? He dropped $10,000 or $20,000 on a weekend in doing stuff he shouldn't be doing with cocaine and, you know, escorts and all sorts of stuff. And he showed me his trading the other day when we were doing this. And I said, "How's the trading going?" He showed me his screen. I said, "Look, I can't see it." He told me he's up $900,000 in the last 2 weeks or something, trading crypto or whatever it is, which it's not my bag at all. But where I'm going to with this is I have found a niche, counseling and mentoring with guys who they're going to struggle to find a counselor and a mentor who will understand and relate and identify to the headspace of earning a lot of money, dealing with vices, drink, drugs, gambling, escorts, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I just find it amazing. I find when I say it amazing, I find it uh, sort of unbelievable that I've landed in this space where I can help men be honest and open and deal with their stuff. And it's a space that probably your average counselor mentor is not going to really understand. So it's very, very fulfilling. And where I'm going to with all this is really grateful. Feel very, very grateful for the space that I'm in today. Very, very lucky man. Very, very lucky man. Yeah.
I feel like with what you said, it's interesting because we had recently on this show a therapist. He was specifically on gender. It was talking about the issues he has with the gender rights in the UK. But what's fascinating with him was he was saying something similar to what you're saying. Is there was he found himself in a space where there were lots of people who had seen counselors, seen therapists over their child's gender, and they couldn't necessarily relate, they couldn't understand. But with him, they were able to build on a more of a personal level. And I feel like with what you're saying, I think it's probably quite relatable for a lot of men who are ambitious, a lot of men who are trying to push forward in their lives, and I think it's hard for them. It's hard for them to talk to a counselor. Largely, they tend to be female. There's much more counselors that are female, therapists that are females than men, and also there's just not that. How can they relate to somebody who has that aggressive work culture in them, and then sometimes maybe it goes into their personal life. Is that fair to say?
That is true. It's true. So what you just sort of one thing you alluded to there, it's absolutely right, is that basically you think about any successful person you can think of, and certainly any successful person. Like I've got friends of mine who've won Rugby World Cups, so they've gone to the top of the pile in rugby. I worked in the city with some like guys who were making for the bank $100 million a year. I'm now working with guys who I was talking to a broker the other day, and he's been offered a deal, $10 million over 6 years or something to move companies, da 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 da, right? You, you cannot get to that place without an enormous amount of drive, right? And sacrifice
Yeah.
and ego, right? So you've got someone who's phenomenally driven, prepared to make extraordinary sacrifices, right? And they will have ego and pride going on and will get themselves, the stress that they will have gone through to get to the top of the mountain. And certainly in rugby players, they put their bodies, take their bodies to the limit. And in the city, guys will sit there with massive positions and win and lose and whatever. So when when I talk to these guys, I relate stories back to them. And that then builds the therapeutic relationship. They go, oh my God, this guy knows. Let me give you an example. So this guy that's, the crypto trader, he's got a bit of trouble with cocaine. I said, mate, I was doing 20 to 30 grams of cocaine a week. And he was like, oh my God. And I said, yeah. And I wanted to stop and I couldn't stop. And he said, mate, that's me. That's me. I said, look, I've been there, right? I talked to one guy, and we're talking about my trading. And I said, one day I was up like, had a budget of $10 million trading at Citibank 1 year. And, we go January 1st to deck 31. And I lost $6 million in a day in August or September. This is 2011. And there was a Japanese nuclear thing happened. And I've made virtually $1 million a month for 8 months. It took me 8 months to make $8 million, and I lost 6 million in 6 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours or something. So because I've been there, right? I mean, the story, the other side of that story was that I went home that night. I just was like rabbit in the headlights. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, and I just sat there and I just had this moment of clarity and thought, if I lost $6 million in 4 hours, how much could I make in 3 months left? 3 or 4 months left of the year. I ended up making about $30 million in like just
Wow.
had this enormous run and got paid out quite well. But those stories, when I've got a trader in front of me and I'm telling them, they go, this guy gets it. This
Yeah.
guy knows. He's been there. He's been dry retching into a bin because I'm physically and mentally. overwhelmed by the loss of all this money. What am I going to do? And these guys have been there. So I've just found this niche that is highly fulfilling for me and very, very helpful for this particular type of professional client: bankers, brokers, CEOs, financial people, surgeons. I seem to be attracting this sort of level of intellect, and these guys are under pressure. The other thing about these guys is, at that level, you've got a winning script, and to put your hand up and say you've got a problem, mate, it's hard. It's hard. And they're winning at work. Normally got a lovely wife, they've got kids, they're providing. And if they get themselves into sort of any, if they're struggling, who do they go to?
Yeah.
Who do they go to? Because that ego and that pride, sort of is a bit of a barrier um, to addressing their issues. It's I find it phenomenally interesting. Phenomenally interesting.
Fascinating. And I think there's definitely a gap in the market for help for those profiles of people, because a lot of the stuff we see online, when it therapists, counselors, even the people I get to talk to on this podcast, a lot of the time it's often they would say they can't relate to what you're saying. Often it'd be like, the job's a problem, quit the job, move on. That would probably be the advice I'm guessing all of your clients have probably got. They just can't comprehend the struggles that they go through, the way that they're almost wired. Whereas obviously somebody like you've lived that experience, you understand it so
Right.
much more. You almost have to have that monster-like mentality. You've got to be a bit delusional and all these sort of things. I think a normal therapist or counselor will not understand, in my opinion, or from what I think and what they go through, what you go through.
Yeah. Well, it just helps. It's that if I'm talking to you and we are identifying and relating, then you are more likely to make yourself vulnerable and be very honest and very open with what's going on. When people are very honest and open and see me, see the people who've seen my podcast, clients, one of the things they contact me, they go, I said, oh, why'd you contact me? I said, well, it sounds like you have been through some of the stuff that I've been through. But one of there's a common denominator just about with all my clients. They just go, mate, you're so honest. You're just so honest. And I said, I've got nothing to hide. I
Yeah.
don't, Sunil, you can ask me a question about anything about my life and I'll answer it truthfully, right? Why? I've dealt with the guilt, the shame, the remorse, and the embarrassment. And that's attractive to people. People think, my God, this guy's so vulnerable, can make himself so vulnerable, owns his own mistakes, gets 9 years clean and sober, and wants to help others. And they go, I want to speak to this bloke because why? I would like to think he's genuine.
Yeah.
He's authentic. It's not bullshit. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's not like, it's just real. And they seem to be attracted to that sort of energy. As I said before, I find it absolutely fascinating, this space I've landed in, given where I was. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about your career at Citibank. That's obviously where you spent like 22 years, so much of your time as in the trading world. What was that like? Um, how how did you become so successful within the organization? And yeah, how did that all happen? And what was it like?
I was money broking for 4 years at a company called RP Martins, and a bloke at Citibank who was I was broking him. He was a banker. He was taking positions, and I was his broker. And he was this Jewish guy. He's a lovely guy. We went to a kosher restaurant one day. I mean, I don't have any strong religious beliefs. We just got on very well, and we were talking. And I told him about my background, and he said, "You should go banking." And I was 30 years old. And I said, look, it's difficult to get into a bank at 30 years old, even with a broking background. So he said, look, there's a job going, give it a go. So I'm going to cut a very long story short. I had 12 interviews over 6 months. I had six interviews for a job and I didn't get it. And then I thought, oh, well, I forgot about it. About 2 months later, they rang me back and said, look, there's another job going. You got down to the final two first time. Why don't you, come back? And I said, okay. So I had another six interviews and I got this job. And the first year I really struggled in the sense of it was a real change and I got really, really challenged in that environment. And then my second year in the bank, I first year was just sort of a junior trader. I wasn't taking any positions. You just had to learn the systems. And what happened was in my second year, I think I got a book and I started to demonstrate that I could manage risk, make a bit of money. And then really it was just an upward trajectory. And I worked through all there's a sort of pecking order of trading books. So I started on
Yeah.
small books like the Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, Canada dollar. Then I went to dollar yen. Then I think I went to dollar Swiss. Then I think it was sterling. And then I ended up with the biggest book on the desk. So I became the most senior trader on the desk. And at that point, I think we had 10 or 12 traders. And I was the most senior, well, I had the biggest book. And I would say that one of the biggest things that I was successful about was I just dug in. I just, like I was listen, trust me, there was guys on that desk who were far more intelligent than me. And there was guys on that desk who could really disseminate markets better than me. But I could earn a dollar. I'm not going to lie. I had a euro book. There was plenty of flow coming in big bang. I'm not going to deny that, but I worked that flow really well, and I could put it into a position. And look, you don't stay 18 years at a major bank unless you are consistently making money. But
Yeah.
I would say, if you said to me what separated me or what was, my gift, for want of a better word, for trading, I just had a feel for a market. So I could put on a position, politics, economics, whatever. I go, look, I think this is a position I want.
Right.
But I could feel when it was going. And when it went, I was quickly, once it started, no good. I used to say to my trainees, TIE, timing is everything. No good having the right position at the wrong time,
Yeah.
right? So you work something out and you put it on, but it just takes 2 or 3 months to eventuate, to sort of bake, if you like, mature into it actually goes. I would have some sort of position in the back of my mind. I'd be looking, I'd be looking, I'd be looking, I'd be looking. And then once I see some action, and then I say to people, I was good when there's blood in the water. When there was fear and the markets went, I'd pile in. And I remember there was one year I was up nothing. I had the biggest book and I'd made no money by June, which was horrendous. And in the last 6 months, I just knocked it out of the park, made $24 million. But the market went one way very strongly. And every time people said it won't go any further, I just kept going and going and going and rode this position virtually right to the end. So I think I was good when markets were fearful. But I will admit straight away, I mean, there's one guy on a desk, Rob. He was special. He'd trade sterling, and he'd buy and sell me every day as a week as a trader. And there was another guy before him called Alfie, Italian bloke. He was different grade. He was different class. And when you see someone who you know is special, it just makes you think, I'm okay, right? I'm okay. It'd be like playing football with Ronaldo or Messi or something.
Yeah.
You run around going, "Oh, look, I'm okay." I'm playing for Citibank, or I'm playing for Real Madrid, or I'm playing for Barcelona or something. And then you look across and go, "That bloke is on a different planet.
Yeah.
I'm okay, but that geezer, he's something special." So I was one of the okay blokes.
Yeah. One thing that obviously with Citibank and your trading thing always gets brought up is Gary Stevenson. It's probably the first time when it's what made me listen to one of the podcasts that you were featured in. And naturally, it's drawn a lot of attention. I'm sure you've had lots of attention from it as
Yeah,
well as the realities of what happened at his time at Citibank. Um, First of all, maybe you could just talk about who he was at Citibank, and then second of all,
yeah,
about the truth in terms of what actually happened at his time
yeah,
there.
yeah. So Gary, I was extremely fond of Gary when he came onto the desk. If anyone's not read his book called The Trading Game, read it. It's an excellent book. I am JB in the book. I'm a senior trader who was addicted to cocaine. Little backstory on that. He didn't know. Gary didn't know that I was doing drugs. I was sitting beside him doing cocaine all day, and he didn't know. And the reason I know he didn't know, I reached out to him about 4 years ago, a couple of years before his book came out. I hadn't seen him for years. I reached out to him and said, "Look, mate, let's just meet up. I need to apologise to you because I was a bit harsh on you at the end of my career at Citibank." He was in dispute with the bank. I thought he was a pain in the ass at that time. I told him so. Then I left the bank. He left the bank. So I apologised to him and I said, "Oh, look, I don't drink or drug anymore." He said, "What do you mean, drug?" And I said, "Yeah, I used to do cocaine." He said, "What, on the desk?" And I said, "Mate, I sat beside you. I was doing cocaine all day." And he couldn't believe it. And he said, "Can I put this in a book?" I said, "Yeah, go for your life. I mean, yeah, I not in a million years did I think this book was going to be as good as it was, but
Yeah.
that's all credit to Gary. I mean, you've got to give the guy, he comes from Ilford. He wins a card game that Citibank had set up. He gets himself in the Citibank. He's there for 6 years. He has 2 good years trading, one in particular. He leaves the bank, and Gary Stevenson is no one. Then he writes a book. Then he's got this YouTube channel. It is an amazing story. So he puts all that stuff in the book. We'll come back to the book in a second. When he was on the desk, he was just charismatic, worked really hard. I thought his backstory was amazing. I mentored him, that not in an official role. I used to mentor a lot of the young guys. I just wanted to make sure that, the early days in the banking industry can be a bit, I wouldn't say brutal, but demanding and challenging. It's a very, very stressful, demanding environment. So whenever we got a new graduate on the desk, I took it upon myself just to, I don't know, protect them a little bit maybe and just give them some guidance and make sure that, they had every opportunity to succeed and no one, so that's a rugby thing, like we're a team, a young guy comes into the team, like, let's just protect this kid. And he went really well. I gave him his first book, which was a Kiwi book. I said, "Mate, you're good to go. Take the Kiwi book. You won't make very much money out of it. You can't really make too much, but you'll get used to all the systems." Then the Swissy book came up, and I was asked, they said, "Oh, we're thinking about giving Gary the Forward Swiss book." I said, "Yeah." I said, "No problem." I said, he'll be fine. He will be absolutely fine. And I was right. He got a bonus in his first year trading. I think it was 400,000 US. His second year was 2.5 million. And then after that, he got in dispute with the bank. And after another 2 years, he was gone. So when it was on all the up, it was great. He fell out at the end because he was sitting at the end of the desk with headphones on and a hoodie. And it just really annoyed me, you know. And then I saw him, I apologised to him a few years later. He wrote the book. And then the book came out and it was a great book. And I reached out to him on WhatsApp and said, "Mate, look, really good book, but some of these claims about, the most profitable trader at Citibank, I've got concerns about those claims because I just don't think they're true." And he said, "Oh, sorry, you didn't like the book." And I said, "Mate, I didn't say I didn't like the book. I said, anyway." He, we've had some other chat about some stuff. And then for the last 2 years, I've just seen this, there's two speeds with Gary. For me, there's two speeds. I believe what he talks about is right. I absolutely believe a lot of what he says is right. I think the wealth disparity is going to get worse. And I think it's wrong. I think they should tax the wealthy. They should tax the wealthier more. They should definitely tax the super wealthy. They should tax Google and Amazon and all these companies that, are domiciled elsewhere. They should tax them more. I believe, I think Gary said he doesn't have confidence that the government has the teeth to get it done. I agree with that. I don't agree with him when he sort of says the rich is to blame. I think that this is a function of capitalism. So on one side of the coin, I agree with so much Gary says. On the other side of the coin, I just go, is providence important? Is telling the truth important? Is being genuine important? Is being authentic important? Being transparent important? So I wrote a book review. Then I wrote something on LinkedIn saying I don't believe he was. And the truth of it, Sunil, is this. It's his opinion he was. It's my opinion he wasn't. The difference between Gary and I is the FT wrote an article. They contacted me and they wrote an article. And unbeknown to me, they contacted a lot of people at Citibank. They couldn't find one person. They couldn't find one person who would remotely entertain the fact that Gary was the most profitable trader at Citibank, let alone his other claim that he was the biggest or best trader in the world. So I just let it go, and I've written some stuff, and some people come on for podcasts like yourself, and we talk about stuff. And Gary is people have an interest in Gary because he's controversial. He's got over 1 million followers on YouTube. Why? Because he is representing a people, a layer of society who are very, very upset. They're pissed off. They're struggling to get jobs. I think it's 34 years old now. You got to be until you get on the property ladder. That's the average age. And Gary's representing those people. So long-winded answer. One side of the coin, I agree with so much what Gary says. On the other side of the coin, me and an absolute shopping list of people do not believe he was Citibank's most profitable trader. And we got on the other side of the coin, Gary, stand alone going, he's not corroborated. He's got no corroboration of his comment that he was the most profitable trader. So that's how the land lies.
It's interesting because just hearing you say that and the other City people say it does definitely damage, in my opinion anyway, credibility on when he talks about other stuff and his other his some of his concerns with what's going on in the UK. It really does damage some of that. And like I watched again, I never read the book Trading Game, but I watched the first time he became to my attention. He did a podcast with Stephen Bartlett. It's massive.
Yeah, the debate. Yeah, correct. Yeah, with Daniel Priestley, Stephen Bartlett, and Gary. Yeah,
Yeah, and I, and
saw
I
it. Yeah.
and I think maybe just my political beliefs, but I was more on the Daniel side of what they were discussing and stuff. And I do agree with everything you said there in terms of taxing Google and Starbucks, these companies. I mean, Starbucks
Yeah.
for 12 years didn't pay a penny tax, which is crazy in the UK. So I definitely
Yeah.
agree with all that stuff. But then, yeah, I felt like it was quite emotion led sometimes with Gary, and I started to think, is that part of the game or what he's trying to do? And then when I started seeing on other podcasts yourself, and the credibility thing is, I think, really, really important when you're debating stuff like that. And I don't think it would have made a difference to me or anyone or people even like really like Gary if he was the second best or the third best or
Correct.
really good or whatever
Yeah.
or average. I don't think anyone would really care. Like I don't think anyone would sit there and be like, "Oh, you weren't the best." I don't think anyone would. But I think the fact that he said that, it just makes it a bit, I don't know, tainted's the word maybe. I don't know.
I think as a counsellor, right, this is my counselling hat on. So one of the big things about counselling is understanding the why. Okay, someone drinks a lot of alcohol. Why? Why are you drinking a lot of alcohol? So I say to my clients, no judgment, no criticism, but why are you doing that? Why is your marriage in trouble? Why are you having an affair? Why are you doing drugs? Why, right? So I think to myself, I sat here and I've thought about it. I said, why is it so important to Gary? Why does it say, he says it in every podcast, everything? Like his ego goes from, oh, I was the most profitable trader at Citibank globally in 2011, to he lets himself go at times go, look, I was the best trader in the world or the biggest trader in the world. Now that statement in itself, I mean, how big's your ego to sit there and go, I am the best, biggest trader in the world? I mean, that is just ludicrous. But forget that one about the best trader in the world. Let's just stick with his staple comment. I was the most profitable trader at Citibank in 2011, and he keeps going at it. FT comes out and goes, here's all these people that say, no, you won't. And he goes, oh, they're gangsters. They're mafia. They don't dress like me, talk like me. They don't want to listen to me. They want to discredit me. They want to run me over. Right. And I go, I've got a theory. How about they are just telling the truth? Just, here's the truth. Right. But the thing is, I believe Gary wants it to be true. He needs it to be true, right? Because then he can go, This is Gary. I came from Milford. I got into Citibank, and all these white private school kids, right? I'm better than them. I beat them. I was the best in the world. So when he talks to his viewers and what are on YouTube, he goes, I'm like you guys. And I've got two fingers up to the establishment, and I was the best. All those guys that had all that privilege and entitlement, I beat them. I won. I got to the top of the pile, right? And as you say, that lends enormous credibility for him to say, like, listen, I'm one of you. I went over the other side. I kicked their ass,
Yeah.
and then come back to you guys and say, look, I'm with you. And they just rally around him. Only one problem.
I,
The comment's not true. The comment is not true. Now, that's my opinion. And that opinion is corroborated and supported by a lot of people at Citibank. Yeah. And just want to finish on one thing there, right? I reckon his supporters, they don't care whether he's number one or not. They don't care. Right. But see, there'll be people, they'll see this podcast who will hate on me because I've said something negative about Gary, right? They don't care what anyone says, they support Gary. But the other half of society goes, like you go, does credibility matter? Does truth matter? Does authenticity matter? And that there is the conflict
yeah.
right there and then. Yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with what you said about the. I've never even thought about that. The putting your two fingers up to all the private school people, privilege, and I beat them. I think you've literally nailed it. I've never even thought
Yeah.
to think like that. I think that's. I don't think you could have said it better. And it's interesting because on this podcast I get to interview like amazing people like yourself with great careers and done amazing things. And I've like made a real effort now to only listen to people or to listen to as much as I can with people who've done or achieved something in their life. And it doesn't mean they have to be older or whatever. You could be a really young entrepreneur. But one of the reasons why
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
I love listening to people's stories who are trying to improve themselves, whether it's
Yes.
so, and I think that's really, really important. Whereas, why I don't think I'll ever really listen to Gary's YouTube or podcast or whatever, it's because I just don't think it's credible or the truth. So now I just don't want, like, I find anything else great. I'm sure there's some really good things he says or whatever, but I'm not going to subscribe to it. Whereas maybe if he just said the actual truth of what happened, maybe I would, and maybe there's lots of other people who would as well.
Mm.
But I think yeah, it's a real shame to make that kind of that lie basically about this because, like you said, I don't think many people would care. I mean, have you spoken to him recently in the last few years or last since those exchanges?
I'll tell you something, right? We haven't spoken. No, we haven't spoken, right? But I sent him a couple of messages. I sent him one message saying, see, I've got to be honest, right? I've got no hate in my heart for Gary. I've got no agenda against Gary. People ask me questions, I answer the questions, right?
Yeah,
And I have opinions, but I have no hate in my heart for Gary. I'm actually still quite fond of Gary, still respect Gary because of what we went through. I do think he's an important voice and I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but when he goes on to Daniel Priestley, I think all that debate's good. I didn't think he handled himself very well. He got too emotional, got too personal, and I think a little bit he was out of his depth intellectually, but that's just my opinion. But I do
really.
think he's important. I do think he's important he's got to be. I think he's got so many followers. He's got an important message from those people. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or different, but I do think he needs to be at the table. If you know what I mean. Getting back to your question, I sent him a message. I said, "Oh, this must have been a number of months ago," saying, "Look, I don't agree with your comments about your trading ability." I said, "But I do. I keep going." I actually said to him, "Keep going." I said because I don't agree with everything, but there's certain people who need to be at the table, politicians,
Yeah,
entrepreneurs, and I think Gary is a voice. And I said, look, keep going. And funny enough, when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, I thought of Gary and I just thought of that kid that came onto the desk. And I actually sent him a WhatsApp message and I said, mate, just be careful. Now, Gary hasn't returned any of these texts and WhatsApps, and I'm not offended by that. No, that's, whatever. He's very busy, I'm sure, and all that sort of stuff. Um, I believe that there is a documentary that is being done around Gary, and I believe that I will be contributing to that documentary,
Right.
and that will be, I believe, in the next month. So if that happens, again, I believe I'll be sitting with Gary, and that's going to be,
Wow.
yeah, that's going to be. I actually said to someone, I actually approached some podcasters and I said, get me and Gary in the same room, get us in the same room. And they, you know, they couldn't get it done. They said they reached out and they said they got nothing back from his team or whatever it was. So I haven't seen him. I would love to sit down with Gary and just have a conversation as two former colleagues. As I said, it's a difficult one for me. See, the thing is, Sunil, this day and age, like let's just choose Charlie Kirk for example. It's like this: you're either for Charlie Kirk or you're not. Right? That's it. In society these days, there's no grey area. You've
100.
got you've got to commit to one or the other.
Yeah.
Right? With me, I don't hate Gary. I'm not pro Gary. I'm not against Gary. I believe some of what he says is true. Some of what he says is absolutely correct. But there's one thing that I totally and utterly disagree with. And I'll be very honest. I went through some stuff, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to say too much because all I can say is this: I've got evidence that will show that was not the most profitable trader in 2011. I've now got evidence that, in the appropriate time will come to light that will show that he was definitely not the most profitable trader in 2011. That will come to light at the appropriate time.
In I mean, not in Gary's defense, but why would he want to do like a podcast on me? Because if I was Gary, if I was on his team, I would probably say no chance. You shouldn't speak to Gary because you're going to invalidate one of the things that really propelled him to that position. You're going to essentially invalidate it off the cuff, and you obviously have the facts, you have the figures, you were there. So many other people who were there support what you're claiming, what you're saying. So in his side, if let's say he's watching this, why should he agreed to do a podcast with you or have a chat with you?
Well, he's not doing a podcast. It's like a documentary. Maybe I won't meet him. Maybe I won't meet him. But I do know there's a podcast there's a documentary being done on him. I believe this is what I believe. This is what I've been told, and that I will be approached to contribute to it. And I said, oh, am I going to meet Gary? Am I going to actually sit with him? And they said, yeah, quite possibly. So, I think. The interesting thing about this, Neil, just talking to you, I think some way in another, and I didn't set out to do this. Like Gary got popular, and I questioned something. As a result of that, I went on to Rob Moore, Dodge Woodall's podcast went really, really well, and they doing exactly what you did. Talk about the career, talk about the drugs, talk about my counselling and mentoring. But the fact of the matter is, Gary's topical. So then we always get around to Gary Stevenson, right? But I sort of feel that this is coming to a head, and I'm guessing they must. I'm guessing that I'm a bit of a pain in the ass to them. I'm guessing, like he's out there saying I was the most profitable trader globally at Citibank in 2011, and I'm consistently saying no, you weren't, no, you weren't. So it's going to. I get this feeling that this is going to sort of come to a head one way or another. It just seems to be building. Just seems to be building at the moment. So, and you know what, Sunil? One thing today, I'm 9 years clean and sober. I've owned all my problems in the past. I speak clearly about my addiction. I went through effectively a divorce. My kids are in my life. I'm healthy. I haven't had a drink or drug for over 9 years. I live in my truth. I live in my honesty. I'm genuine and authentic, transparent to the best of my ability. So I've got no fears about this. I don't fear anything. I'm sure there'll be some backlash from the pro Gary people, but hey, I'm happy to live in truth. I'm happy to live in honesty, and as long as I follow that road, then I have nothing to fear.
And that's the
Yeah.
definitely the best way to live as well. That's the most, I think, one of the most important things. And talking about the addictions that you faced, it's clear like lots of us would have seen the films, Wolf of Wall Street, all that sort of stuff. And um, how what was it, why did you in the end stop? Like, what made you stop using drugs? And is there a connection with the alcohol and drugs? Because it's fascinating when you say you're sober from drugs and alcohol. Could
Mm,
could what am I trying to say? Could you still be drinking and not
mm.
be doing drugs, or vice versa? Like, first, what made
Yeah.
the change? The second thing, why the sobriety on both?
Okay, so why did I change? Today I am 13 and a half stone, so I'm 86 kilograms. I got up to at my lowest point when I was doing drugs. So at one stage in my life, I was 95 kilograms, right? When I did drugs, I got down to 63 kilograms. I lost one third of my body weight because I wasn't eating. And the reason I wasn't eating was because I was doing anywhere between 3 and 6 grams of cocaine a day. So I was doing 20 to 30. For anyone who doesn't know anything about cocaine, 20 to 30 grams of cocaine a week is like 30 to 40 bottles of wine a week. And I wasn't drinking at all. I was not drinking at all. I was just doing a lot of cocaine. And why was I doing a lot of cocaine? Because I was addicted. Did I want to do cocaine? No, I didn't. I didn't want to do it. But my body craved it every day and my mind obsessed about it. That is addiction. Addiction is cunning and baffling. It is irrational and unreasonable. I got to a point where one night, I was sitting in a hotel room. I'd been to rehab. I'd relapsed. I was sitting in a hotel room and I just literally just said, "Oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to die." I had two young kids. They were 5 and 3 at the time. I'm going to die. And I stopped. And the reason I said I don't, I haven't had a drink or drug for 9 years is if you go into a 12-step program and enter what we call recovery, recovery is abstinence. So abstinence from all mind altering drugs. So I didn't have a problem with alcohol at all, right? And they said to me, "You got to stop alcohol at all as well." And I said, "Hold on. I got a ton of problems with cocaine. I mean, that devil's dandruff, that's going to kill me. I know that. Right? So I've got to stop that. But drink's not a problem." And they said, "No, you got to abstinence." And after a period of time, I stopped drinking, and I thought, I don't know how long this is going to last because I'll stop the and the first year is really hard. First year's hard in recovery. Once you get that done, I believe you can start to get a bit of clear sailing. And today, I don't think about drinking drugs at all. I go to concerts. I go to Oasis last week. I go to football events. I go to rugby. I go to dinners. But I don't drink and I don't drug. I don't miss it. Right. But so in answer to your question, why would I not drink? Because it's a risk. I don't have a problem with drink, but if I
Right.
get six beers in or 8 beers in, and I'm at a pub and someone says, "Do you want a line of cocaine?" Sunil, trust me on this. I do one line of cocaine, I've got to do a second. If I do a second, I've got to do a third. And I'm gone. And then I tear down the foundations of my life.
Right.
So that's how recovery works. Yeah.
That makes sense. And what's interesting is what I find fascinating with yourself, and not just yourself, is obviously a thing throughout the city world of London in particular, and New York. I'm guessing the same, is how you're able to do this, but also be at such a high intense functioning job where you are like doing crazy amazing things, but also battling this addiction. So like how does that work? How are you able to do both? Like it's
I've got to tell you, I've got to be honest with the cocaine. There's saying in recovery, you live to use and you use to live. So I lived to do cocaine because I had to do it, right? But then I had to do it to live. So I would go to work. And the thing about the big difference between cocaine and alcohol is alcohol, you doze off whereas cocaine, you stay alive, right? You stay, right? So I functioned, I would say, to a high level until my last year at Citibank, where I'd lost so much weight. I think to some extent, I was going insane. It was crazy, right? In my second last year at Citibank, I had one of the most amazing years I've ever had trading, and I was doing cocaine every single day. And you know, when I tell that story, I don't the thing about that story is it's almost like demeans trading. Like you sort of think, wow, trading must be easy because this guy's off his head. But I think focused, I got into it and whatever to some point, and I just called the markets, and I think I made 24 million bucks for the bank or something, and got paid a couple of million or something, if I remember rightly. And I just had this. It was just like, you know, people were like, wow, you know, Jesus, I think I referred to it earlier in the podcast. Actually, I'd made no money for the first 6 months, and I just went on this unbelievable run, and it just seemed like what happened was I just in this 1 year. This is again, something's happened in your life. You sit there and go, "That's crazy." I was doing a lot of cocaine. I didn't make any money, and then last 6 months of this year, I started getting on this run. I was building up this big position. I was making a load of money, and there was this big economic thing that was happening in the Europe one weekend. And the start of that week, I thought the smartest thing to do is just take all the positions off the table. Just square up and just lock in profit. Lock in profit. I did that by about Wednesday, and then I got itchy feet, and I just thought, so think stock market. I wasn't trading the stock market, but think stock market. I bought the stock market, it gone up, 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 up. It gets up here. There's this big economic thing, and I think, squared up. And I went, you know what? Market's come a long way. The risk here that it just tanks, it drops. So I just put on this load of risk the other way. There was this big economic fall. I can't remember exactly what it was. So I go home Friday night. Unfortunately, I'm using all weekend. I go back in Monday morning. I didn't check the news, didn't know what happened. And I hit the P&L, and the market had done exactly what I thought may happen. It just fell out of bed, tanked, and that was my position. And I think I made $4 million just on that one trade on that weekend. So going back to your question, yeah, you can function for a long time, especially not so much. I don't know about the alcohol, but you know, for me, I can only speak on my behalf. But when it went wrong that last year, oh, my trading was absolutely horrible. It was poor. It was all over the place, and I'd actually unraveled quite poorly. And I went to Citibank. I know this sounds. Every time I say this next comment, everyone just doesn't believe it. No one at Citibank on the desk knew. No one knew. Gary sat beside me and did not know. Right. So I go to Citibank and said, I want a voluntary redundancy. I'm done. They said, what's going on? I said, I'm cooked. Didn't tell anyone. And I left the bank. Is there a lot of people on cocaine in the city? I don't think there's a lot. I think there's higher than average, in the city because of one reason: disposable income. Where there's disposable income, you've got vices. But I didn't use with anyone at Citibank because I wanted to protect my secret. So the best thing was
Right.
don't venture into it with anyone else. But yeah, I functioned for a long time, which is, yeah, crazy. Crazy when I think about it. Put my health at risk. How I didn't have a heart attack is absolutely beyond me. I'm so lucky. I am so lucky. Yeah, very grateful.
With what you're so once you obviously became sober, you've made that decision. Was this next venture what you do now? Was that always something in your head where you thought when you were going through the steps of recovery, you thought this is what I want to do? Was that always in the back of your mind?
No, it's an interesting one. In recovery, I'm not a religious person at all. I'm not critical of religion. I think it's an amazing thing if you believe, if you have faith in a religion, that belief and that faith, I think, is such a strong thing, that faith. But I never had a faith as such. But in recovery, we talk about a higher power. It's a God of your understanding. So it's not a religious God; it's a spiritual God. And I absolutely believe in this now that things happen for a reason. If you put one foot in front of the other in the right direction, you will be rewarded. So I leave Citibank. Kids are in private schools. Loads of kids are in private school, and I didn't work for 4 or 5 years. I went in and out of court, went through effectively a divorce, and then me and a business partner had 100 London black cabs, which we rented out. that was going well, just get passive income from that, building up equity in them. COVID hits, kills that business. I lose 400 grand in that or something. I go through effectively a divorce. So, good portion of my wealth goes. And then I was sitting there, and this is where it gets crazy, Sunil. I look back and go, I don't, how I've ended up here today. I don't think I drove it. I think some sort of higher power, because a guy I know, Nick, he's a counsellor. He said, "You'd make a good counsellor." I said, "No, I don't want to be a counsellor." And he said, "I'll go and do this course for 6 months. It's just a counselling skills course, a lot of psychology. You'll really like it. It'll be good for your recovery. You're not doing anything." I said, "You know what? He's right." So go and do this 6 months course. I loved it. Psychology, Freud and Carl Rogers and Caroline Podetsky and all this, like, just theory stuff. And I thought, wow, this stuff's interesting. Then they said, "Oh, there's a 2-year diploma, and then you can become a counsellor." And I thought, fuck it, I'll do the, this 6 months has been so interesting. I'll do the next 2 years. And then this gets really crazy. In the last year, you have to do 100 hours of placement, volunteering. And so I got a job at Mind, the mental health charity, volunteering. The first client I had was a female, mixed race, 24 years old. Another was an alcoholic. Another died of cancer. She was struggling with her own sexuality. She, there was unmanageable at home with the family, and she was struggling to finish off her degree, and she had a bit of ADHD. And this was my first client in placement, right? So I did that first hour. Man, I just come out and I said to the boss, I said, "Mate, this young lady needs someone a lot more experienced than me." Anyway, he said, "Mate, she's got you. You're it. Just put your heart and soul into it. Be compassionate, be caring, all that sort of stuff." Cut a very long story short, we finished the 12 sessions. About 4 months later, I answered a private call, which I never do, right? And she said to me when we left, she said, "Thank you for everything." I said, "What are your dreams?" She said, and she'd worked out what her sexuality was. She was gay. And she said, "My dream is to get out of this place called Basildon, get out of Essex, go be independent in somewhere else in the country, get into tech, have her own place, and be with, someone she loved in a gay relationship." As I said, 3 or 4 months later, I answered a phone call, which I never do. And I said, "Kent Bray speaking." And she said, "Hi." And I said, "Hey, where'd you get my number?" And she said, "Oh, through your website." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "You all right?" And she said, "Yeah, I just want to ring you up and tell you something." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" She said, "I'm in Newcastle. I've got a job in the tech industry. I'm standing outside a real estate agent with my girlfriend, and I'm about to sign my first lease agreement on an apartment." And so, Neil, I cried. I cried. And I do, she couldn't tell, well, I don't think she could tell I was crying. And I got off the phone, and at that moment, I knew what I'd be doing for the rest of my life.
Right.
And that's how the wheels of life turn sometimes. Sometimes a higher power just puts you into a place that you never, ever, ever thought you'd be. And that's my story.
Amazing. And so now you have your own business, right? This is
Yep,
your
private practice, yep. Online. I don't do any clients at my home. And the reason I don't do that is because, mate, I've got clients in Brazil, Thailand, Philippines, Hong Kong, Singapore, America, Switzerland, Australia, all around the world doing all sorts of different things. And mate, listen, you're in Dubai, aren't you?
yeah, based in Dubai.
Right. So now I want to do your podcast, and as a result of this, my next client is going to be from Dubai. All right.
Yeah.
I'm manifesting it. I'm manifesting it.
I mean, we'll definitely put all your links to your website, your LinkedIn stuff, all in the
Beautiful.
description bio. So, please, if people are listening to this and they find what you've said useful, definitely reach out to yourself. I found this really, really fascinating, and yeah, it's amazing the work you're doing. Especially maybe in my job, and even with this podcast stuff, I meet so many people I think could definitely do with your advice and your help for sure. So yeah, it's amazing
Beautiful.
to have
Thank
this
you.
conversation. But as a final thing that we do on this show, we always ask the guest for an unpopular opinion that they have that they think should be popular. So it can be something that we discussed in the last.
Oh, listen, you know,
Uh,
you told me this before, an unpopular decision. Okay, I think an unpopular decision, an unpopular opinion. I think that there is I've got to be careful what I say here. I think that disciplining of children um, has gotten too soft. I'm not saying we should hit children. I'm not saying it should be, but I think that I think I think the respect has been lost in society, and I think part of that has been because of remember my mother and father being quite stern. I never got hit, but it was I think there's a place for tough love but I'm not saying violence. I'm not saying physical, but I do think that you know, raising of a voice is the appropriate thing and being stern and firm and denying, like kids' phones and tablets or whatever,
yeah.
all that sort of stuff. I think it's an absolute the respect in society has just gone through the floor. And I think parenting has played a large part in that. So I think a more disciplined, stern, firm approach to parenting, I think would be a good thing for society.
I definitely agree with that. I don't have any kids as of yet, and me and the wife were saying this the other day. I think like so maybe too much nowadays parents want to be the kid's friend or like
Yeah,
they're always, and I think sometimes they forget that they are father
yeah.
and mother and whatever the relationship is.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. Definitely.
Can I just say, I wish I could listen to my own advice because, mate, I'm too soft. I'm just a
Yeah.
softie. I just, yeah, mate. So I've just said that, and then I've just turned to myself and go, mate, you're a hypocrite. Like, mate, come on, like, come on. All right, Kent, KB, JB in the book, whoever I am these days, mate, be genuine. You say you're genuine, you know,
Well,
walk what you talk. Anyway.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Ken. Thanks so much for your time. And like I say, all the in the description, we'll have your website, LinkedIn, and place for people to contact you. So yeah, but again, thank you so much for your time.
Sunil, top man, thank you for inviting me. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.